That was not directed at you.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yep.
We're mic'd up now, so you can hear us.
Yeah. Oh, no. Oh, supposed to stay away from that thing. I don't think we're supposed to get near that thing because it reverberates. So grab your drink if you're going to drink it. Oh, no, I think you're good. Maybe. I don't know. We're good. Okay, yeah. All right, cool.
All right, everybody. So we are Spencer McIntyre and Brandan Geise with Ruby. So thanks everyone for joining us. So, like I said, Brandan Geise right here, and I am Spencer McIntyre. Beautiful faces. So if you can't see us, that's who we are.
So basically, the whole talk here, if you haven't heard of Kingfisher, probably should check it out. But we've done quite a few talks as far as the introductions, how it works, how to set it up. I kind of wanted to do a talk as far as, okay, new features since basically this last year. So the last time we presented here at Bsides 2014. Kingfisher is in active development, powered by Python. Thank you to Spencer. And the best part, it's open source. I've heard a client or someone ask, okay, we have this really cool phishing tool. How much does it cost? And it kind of, I'm talking this?
Yeah.
This work?
Yeah.
This? Yep, okay. So basically, it boggles my mind just as far as how much does it cost? I always say, it's free. It's on GitHub. I mean, you can go download it now. Right now, no cost. There's even support, and that's free too. So, pretty awesome. Okay, so the first thing we'll get into is campaign graphs. So, since the last time we talked about Kingfisher, one of the big integrations would be the actual campaign graphs once you actually send out the phishing email. So you can actually see, okay, who clicked, who didn't, who entered credentials. As you can see here, if you click on the tools and then go to create graph, there's quite a few graphs there as far as pie, bar, and then also map charts, which we'll get into a little bit later, and then also the traditional line visit timeline graph. But basically, we added more in, so if you are collecting credentials, you can actually gauge the client's password complexity if they entered credentials, and then you can give that to them. You can export all of these graphs as a PNG, I believe.
As an image, yep.
As an image. You can export that, put it in a report, put it in a document, whatever you want to do, and it looks all pretty. So yeah, so these are the main graphs. I think before we just had the line, the visit timeline, so visits over time, the visitor OS information as far as the bar chart, and then just a bar chart of the campaign overview. So quite a few new implementations. You can check all these out. Go back. Maybe. Go back.
Double tap? Okay.
There we go. Okay, so this is kind of a, this was a previous campaign that we did with client data. So it doesn't have the name or, doesn't have the name or anything on there, but you can see how you can customize this now. There's also pretty colors, so it's not just gray and white. But down at the bottom, you can have the campaign overview, so the total message is sent, the visits, the unique visits, credentials, unique credentials. Then you can go over there and see it as a pie chart. The coolest thing, or at least the coolest thing I think that we've added lately, is the GeoIP location map. So right there, you can see all the yellow dots. Those are without credentials, so there's people visiting the actual site. Then with the red dots, those are actually clients that submitted credentials. The really cool part about that is you can blow that up, export the image out, and actually see, just if you send it out internally as part of an assessment, as far as a company, if you send it out to industry-wide, a lot of the clusters are right around large city centers. I don't know, it's kind of, that is to be expected, but it's still kind of cool seeing the numbers correlate with what you would expect from the results.
We've been collecting this information for quite a while, but then with the addition of the additional graphs, we're sort of adding in new abilities to be able to visualize the information, which definitely makes a more of an impact when we're trying to explain what it is that we're trying to do to our different clients. Whether that be trying to explain, like the success rate or how many people are submitting credentials or things like that, or even looking back through and seeing like the visitor OS information, so we can see what distribution of the users that are clicking are using iPhones or Androids or anything like that. So with these additional graphs, we're able to actually like visualize that information that previously we had just been storing, and it was just like hanging out in the database. So we're actually doing something with that. It gets to come out and play now. Thanks.
So now we're going to actually get into the GeoIP tracking. So one of the coolest things that I think that we recently added in as far as GeoIP location tracking. So as you can see regularly, if you just go to View Campaign and then go to Visits, you have the email addresses, the IP addresses, visit counts, user agents. That was all normal. We added a new column that basically shows the physical location, and it'll try its best to figure out, okay, Paynesville, Kent. This was one of our test campaigns that we did, so it's all in the general area. The previous slide that we showed that had a lot of client hits around the United States, it's actually really interesting to see, okay, well, wow, there's a lot of people hitting from LA or a lot of people from New York. You can correlate that as far as physical locations there. And then Spencer, if you want to talk about how...
When it's looking this information up, a lot of times we see other tools that are using third-party services or anything like that, which might not be a good idea when the data is considered confidential. If these are the IP addresses of your egress points or something like that, it might not be something that you want. So what we end up doing is we actually end up downloading the free MaxMind database, and we look it up all offline. So these IP addresses that we are resolving to locations are never sent to any third-party service. The Kingfisher server would download that data, so it's all kept in-house.
Yeah, and I mean, that's really important as far as if you're trying to keep the client's confidentiality safe, or at least not letting anyone else know that they're a client. It's all downloaded, and that never exits your server. So here's just a blown up map that I was talking about. You can actually click on the map, blow it up, and then you actually get more resolution as far as, okay, well, wow, there's a lot of people that clicked, that kind of right around Cleveland. Look at that. And then like Chicago, I mean, large city centers as far as that. It's really interesting once you start getting, if you do a lot of campaigns or if you do one campaign with a lot of different users, to kind of correlate data and say, okay, well, hey, these are the users that just opened the email and visited the website. Hey, these are the emails that users actually submitted credentials, and then kind of correlate even geographically. Okay, maybe, West Coast is more apt to submit credentials. You can get into a lot of really cool things that we're kind of working on, but
when it is for a single company, you can use this information to try to determine where they might be primarily based out of. So you can kind of see, they have a lot of people sort of on the eastern side of the U.S. with a couple of exceptions down in what appears to be the San Diego, Los Angeles area and then the Sacramento area. But for the most part, it is in the eastern United States. So when this is all for one company, it does give us that type of information. We can kind of tell where the users are.
So we're not selfish.
People do live outside of the US, and we want to track their information too. We're going to send them our phishing emails as well, because we want everyone to know the joy of phishing training. So we send them to everybody.
Exactly. And so this is the world graph. So not only is it just zoomed in on the United States, but also you can have the world graph as far as larger company, but you can see all around the world. I mean, hey, the dot's actually resized as far as the actual size of the dot compared to other dots as far as how many people in that general location clicked. So you see a really big dot right there, but maybe not a lot of big dots. Maybe there's two in like Europe right there, but then a bunch of scattered ones in the United States. You can correlate that, and the graphs actually change the dot size by the number of people who clicked. So moving on to inline images. I was really surprised that we actually didn't talk about this last year, and I guess we didn't even have it implemented last year.
This was like right after last year.
This is one of the things I really pushed Spencer to do, and once he did, basically I was basically done. Like, this is the only thing that I wanted, and I think it's perfect now, but we kept innovating after the fact. But basically, inline images gives you the ability to embed an image without having those ugly to the left side of your screen, without having the ugly clear boxes with the X, or like, basically you have to click that link to download external images. You can actually embed images. So without internal links, you would send an email message. The images would be hosted on your Kingfisher web server or wherever. It would look like the old and busted one. Okay, yeah, maybe it kind of looks good, but I'd be more apt to click on this one, where you basically open the email, and those images, you don't have to click anything. That's just the way it looks like. And these were both 2 phishing emails as far as ones that we used.
Users know enough to know what that type of email specifically should look like because they've probably seen it more frequently. So when things start showing up the little red X's because the messages that are containing images aren't being downloaded correctly, that's generally enough to start their spidey sense tingling that something might not be quite right with it. So by being able to embed those images, it just has that extra layer of polish to it. It makes it that much more difficult for users to be able to identify that this is a phishing email.
So really another cool feature that we added, and this actually helps a lot with collaboration, and it might be one of the lesser talked about, at least, features that we use in Kingfisher.
Streamlines the process.
But it streamlines the process so much. So we call them KPM files. Essentially, once you get everything set up in Kingfisher, so you set up your web server URL, you set up your the email address that you're going to spoof from, the subject line, the email message, everything. You can go up there to File, Export, and then Export Message Configuration. So that'll ask you to save this .kpm file onto your Linux or Windows system. Once you do that, obviously it'll be a .kpm file. So why is that useful? Okay, so let's say I make a really cool campaign. Let's say the Amazon one. Spencer wants to use it. He gets a last-minute assessment, and he's like, man, I really want to use your Amazon campaign. Can you help me out? Normally, beforehand, I would have to go find Spencer, tell him, okay, we'll do this graphic, here are all the HTML files. With the KPM file, I can literally say, hey, Spencer, here's this KPM file. Open it up, go to File, Import, Message Configuration. It'll import the message, the website URL, the spoofed email address, the subject, everything, basically. Literally, all you need to do is hit send and enter your credentials.
Also, if you're doing multiple campaigns throughout the year, oftentimes you might be like, that assessment that I did back in Q1, that was really, really successful. And in Q2, not so successful. I don't really think it was the education. Maybe it was the pretext that I used. You can export this out every single time. You can sort of build up a catalog of every single one that you have ever done. And if you want to go back and rerun it, it's super easy to just reload up that one file. And it'll break in your message template, all those inline images, all the configuration, everything is there for you. So you just have that one file that contains everything you need to recreate the attack.
And then obviously on the right here, another great thing is you can just have basically a little treasure trove as far as, okay, this was a really good campaign, or I really recreated this Dropbox email really good. I'm going to save that, use it again, just keep it on my file system, so every single time I can go back, open up that KPM file, import everything, even if it was a year ago.
So many new features with messaging. So right up in here, we have one of the newest features that's been created. So we had a message editor originally, and so it was all like black and white text, but the idea was that it was the editor that people would use to edit the HTML of their email that was to be sent. And so it is really nice to be able to have syntax highlighting in there. So that's just sort of an added feature. But the reason why people are really actually intended to use this is because if you right-click it, there is a feature that you can't get in another editor, and that's the ability to drop the tags pre-built for the messaging template itself. So if you want to do something like a date and time, as you can see, if you have insert, you go down there into the date time, there's like 6 or 7 different common formats that you can put in a date and time. So whenever that template is sent, it's always going to be the accurate date and time. As well as doing that inline imaging, you do have to set up the Jinja tag correctly and point it to a file, which might be a little bit difficult. Some people might not want to do that. So if you just right-click and have your insert, and you click that inline image, it'll actually pull up a window where you can generally click your file and just drop it right on in there. So the editor has had a lot of improvements as well to make the creation of the message template and sort of tweaking it a lot easier and more streamlined for people.
Ironically, I think a lot of at least the right-click functionality, even though it looks pretty with the coloring, Spencer added that in, but the right-click functionality at the very beginning of Kingfisher, I basically just had a text document that had all the important, URL.web server, or all these basically things that I would want to input in there that I frequently would. And Spencer saw it, and he's like, I can make that a lot easier. Let me just put right-click in, and then you have the most frequent ones, and those are the most frequent ones. So it just makes it a whole lot easier to be able to say, okay, hey, image tag, I don't need to remember that exact syntax. I can just go at the very bottom of the email, right-click, put it in.
The templating engine is really powerful, but with that comes not only flexibility, but it can be a little bit complicated. You have to remember the different syntax and everything like that. So that right-click menu, just drop in those tags. It's always going to work, and so it makes it a little bit easier. So one of the other new features that we added in was SPF warning. So what we can do is we can actually check the SPF records of a domain that we're trying to spoof from ahead of time. So before we send out our messages, we can tell whether or not they're going to match the SPF policy. And now the SPF policy is what is going to be one of the first things that's going to be checked by any type of anti-spam mechanism. Some type of spam mechanism is going to look to see if the domain that the email is coming from has a published SPF record, which is basically going to say which servers are authorized to send emails on their behalf. So what we can do as an attacker is we can check that record and sort of try to predict what the outcome of that check is going to be, and then tweak our message from there prior to sending them out. What this allows us to do is we can hopefully tell ahead of time with a little bit more accurate certainty whether or not our emails are going to be able to go through, or if they're going to be flagged as spam. And if they are flagged as spam, it's going to tell us and say, hey, there's this SPF violation. You can either ignore it and continue at your own risk, knowing that your messages will probably be flagged as spam, or you can close out, go back and tweak the configuration around, maybe add another letter into the domain name or something of that nature in order to get around it. By default, there are 3 different levels of SPF checks within Kingfisher. The default is the one that's somewhere in the middle. It just checks to see that you're not in violation of a policy. And then the range is also up to the strict one, which also ensures that there is a policy that is published. And then there's the one where it just completely ignores them. So it's really up to the attacker, but it tries to warn you if you try to send messages where the policy is definitely going to be violated.
So one of the actual newer things that was added in.
Brand new.
Brand new, like literally probably, what, a week ago?
2 weeks ago, yeah.
2 weeks ago. A lot of times we get a request from a client, okay, hey, we want you to do training. We don't want to get credentials. We don't want you to get a shell. Okay, maybe not the most fun for us, but we understand the reason as far as training the clients or the employees that click on the email. We want training, but they have an internal training video. Okay, what do? We added in this embed YouTube video Jinja tag. So as far as embedding videos now, as long as it's on YouTube, I mean, you can upload it there. I'm sure you could configure settings as far as making it private or having it not be indexed as far as that. But you can basically set up a website to, okay, they visit it, and then the video loads, and then it plays automatically. So if you go to the next slide. This was the example. So video training, of course. You could also Rickroll people with this. So you have the YouTube video of the Rickroll, and that's what it looks like. Unfortunately, Spencer and I actually had to talk about this as far as a lot of times people ask, okay, how can we make the employee watch the video? Like literally make them, they can't exit it, they can't hit escape. Yeah.
When we want to provide training, a lot of times our clients want to have that little I agree button down there at the very bottom so that the user acknowledges the fact that they know what they did was wrong and that they've gone through the training. So in addition to just being able to embed videos, we have it very documented, and we got it down to like 3 lines of code that needs to be changed to not only embed a video, but also require that the video reaches the end of the file before the I agree button is like enabled. It's silly JavaScript that would be trivial for all of us to bypass, but those users that are clicking on the emails, they might not know enough, and so they have to watch the whole video or be Rickrolled, and they'll get to hang out with Rick Astley for a while before they can agree to their training.
Exactly.
I never want to give you up.
So this was actually added a little bit before the YouTube video feature, but I think this kind of puts the icing on the cake as far as Kingfisher. Website cloning. So a lot of phishing tools out there have the ability to point the tool at a website that you want to clone. So Twitter, Gmail, Yahoo, whatever you want to do, and then actually clone that website, put it on your server, and then phish people from that. Basically makes it easier, essentially, at least if you're a consulting company, makes it easier for the consultant to be able to not have to manually download everything, change everything. So within Kingfisher, if you go into Tools, and then Clone Web Page, you can go into Target URL, set the target URL, and then hit Select, and then specify the directory that you want basically all the files to be dropped into. You hit Clone at the bottom, and Python will work its magic, Kingfisher will work its magic, and it'll download basically all the files that are requested as far as with that initial page. Spencer, you can probably talk.
What's really nice about this is that a lot of times we've seen tools in the past that like to clone websites, and oftentimes they end up doing it by trying to spider the site. They try to do it themselves. They try to use Python to like make that initial request. Maybe they use a regex to try to find additional pages or something like that, or they just like execute wget as a separate process to pull the website down. All of these techniques have different problems with them, and that's that they are trying to parse out the page themselves. Instead of doing that, what we actually do is we actually have the WebKit engine embedded into the process, and then we have the WebKit engine load the page, and then there's a hook built into the WebKit engine to basically say, hey, every single resource you pull during this process, tell us what it is. And so we just go through that and we say, hey, this resource is on the same server. We're going to copy it to disk because we already have that data. And we do that for every single one. So we don't have to use any kind of a regex. So we can use a page that is incredibly dynamic and still be able to clone it perfectly, which is what we have.
So, I just picked a random website, ups.com, sign in there. This is a legitimate one. That's a cloned one. So,
see the difference? Green certificate up top left, no certificate top left.
That's all I changed, literally. Yeah, so I would say, at least as far as anything that I've seen with phishing tools, as far as grabbing the web page, grabbing all the images, making everything correct, the least complicated.
Does all the work. We don't have to parse it. There's very little room for error using that technique instead.
So, upcoming features.
So we don't really have anything listed out right now. The next version is about ready to be released, and we need to wrap this up real quick. But 2.1, which will have the YouTube video embedding, that's going to be coming out. We're also still working on a lot of stuff with improving the Beef integration, which we already have right now. Some additional templating and things of that nature will probably be coming up towards the end of the summer. So have some new features that are going to be hot pipeline.
Basically, go back one more. We started a little bit late. We're good.
OK.
So basically, upcoming features. The whole idea of Kingfisher, initially, it was part of an internal project. We wanted to have a phishing tool internally that we could actually use that had the features that pen testers actually needed. Not all the fluff, not all the, silly things as far as graphs necessarily. Graphs are cool, but immediately we actually wanted the ability to actually do our job as far as pen testers. Like I said, as far as the website cloning, inline images, text message, I basically run out of ideas as far as ask Spencer, hey, can you implement this into Kingfisher? So it's kind of up to you guys as far as what the next steps are. It's still going to be an active project, obviously, but it's GitHub. So if you have an idea, if you want to see a feature, if you have a use case scenario, even if you think it's niche, submit an issue. Spencer's amazing at getting back to people as far as, okay, hey, if you have a problem, or even if you have a request as far as, hey, this would be a really cool idea, we'll implement it. If it sounds good, yeah.
Somebody came up with a feature request a little while ago that was highly specialized. They wanted to run their Kingfisher server behind a proxy, and so they needed a specific header to be implemented in order to keep the client's IP address, which is something I had never thought of before. We're a consulting company. We don't have a front-end proxy. But after he explained it to me, I was able to add that in. And less than a week later, he was up and running, and it was able to work. So we're open to any new features that people want to request. So it's a community project. So anything anybody's interested in, just let us know.
Absolutely. So this kind of wraps it up. Questions? Also, if you ask a question, you get this really cool
Kingfisher stickers.
Kingfisher sticker. If you don't
Anybody have any
ask a
questions?
question, you don't get one.
All right, well, thanks, everybody.
Thank you.